Parasite Eve character backstories. Aya Brea. Aya was born to Mariko Brea, who may be Mariko Anzai from the book or just an homage to her, and an unnamed father who worked as a journalist, alongside her twin sister, Maya. Aya was born in Boston, Massachusetts on November 20, 1972, with an eye defect in her right cornea. Aya, Maya, and Mariko were involved in a car crash when the girls were 5 years old on December 23, 1977. They were transported to St. Francis Hospital in New York City. Aya survived the crash and waited for her mother and sister to come home, but they passed away, and was raised from there as an only child by her father. Maya's cornea was also preserved for possible future use to correct Aya's defect. Approximately 2 years later, Maya's cornea was transplanted into Aya when she was 7 years old. As a young adult, Aya studied criminology at the University of Virginia between 1992 and 1994, and was involved in their ROTC program. She later relocated to New York City and became a police officer for the NYPD, working a mere 3 years before being promoted to the rank of detective. She became part of the father and daughter team, where she was partnered up with veteran officer Daniel Bo Dallas. Within 6 months of working at NYPD's 17th Precinct, Aya became involved in a tragedy known as the New York blockade incident, the events of Parasite Eve. Aya is a bit of a complex character. For the most part, she is portrayed as a strong-willed, intelligent, and honest heroine. Although quiet on the surface, she can be very stubborn and unyielding, occasionally entering arguments with Daniel because of her stubborn nature. Aya is meek and modest in nature, and does not boast about being a hero or possessing superhuman powers. While Aya is mature, where it counts, she also tends to be pretty sarcastic, cold, and brooding, with a sardonic sense of humor. She sometimes cracks silly jokes, likely to cope with her awful predicaments. It doesn't help that Aya has a bad habit of not being able to take people seriously sometimes, particularly when they express any sort of interest in her. She tends to brush them off. Sometimes it's easier for her to pretend that people are just being insincere most of the time. Aya can be sensitive, compassionate, kind, and she is fairly forgiving. She can gentle and nurturing, almost maternal, especially with children. Aya is shown to have very humanitarian and altruistic attributes. Aya couldn't care less about things like race, class, and all the other things humans divide themselves with when the extinction of all life is at stake. An example of her altruism is when she decides to comfort and save the life of such a brash and despicable man like Hans Clamp, despite that he once tried to stab her with a knife. While burning to death, Clamp asks her why she would bother trying to save him, and Aya replies, "First of all, I'm a cop and it's my job, and after all, I am human." Aya despises all pain and suffering of any sort. She has seen enough death and carnage in her life, having witnessed hundreds of lives, both human and animal alike, massacred in front of her. It's impossible for Aya to turn a blind eye to suffering and ignore it. She is also sympathetic to the NMCs, mutated animals. She kills, viewing them as victims of their own bodies, instincts, and neo-mitochondria, and kills them to eliminate the danger they possess and end their suffering. Aya also expresses sympathy to the beta generator, and speaks in strangely poetic and philosophical manner about whether or not it's possible to kill something that was never really truly alive in the first place. Aya is depicted as being the savior of humanity. She is often self-sacrificing and selfless. This could be considered her greatest strength or weakness, as she has a penchant for putting the wants and needs of others before her own. If someone is in danger, she can be pretty compulsive without always thinking things through. In any case, Aya prefers to keep things professional, mostly where a professional relationship is concerned, such as her line of work, and very rarely does she ever like to get herself involved in any intimate affairs. Surprisingly, she can be pretty patient. It's just that when her patience finally runs thin, that she has a danger of losing her temper, going against that professionalism and letting her thoughts and emotions get ahead of her. One somewhat unexplored aspect of Aya is her mental health, especially considering everything that Aya has experienced. There is one thing that she is not proud of: the guilt that weighs down on her. This is most likely the result of various incidents: her surviving the car accident that killed both her mother and her sister, and being the sole survivor of the opera massacre that led into the New York blockade incident. As well, fighter pilots acted as a shield for Aya so that she would live to fight against Eve. One could very well interpret Aya's inclination for self-sacrifice as a product of her survivor's guilt. Aya dislikes it when people put themselves on the line for her, no matter how inevitable it is.